This NAIDOC week, we celebrate for our elders. Join us as we remember the great Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people of the past and present.
On National Surrey Day, we remember and acknowledge the mistreatment of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who were forcibly removed from their families and communities, which we now know as the stolen generations. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children were placed in institutions, homes and missions throughout Australia. These wonderful people are actually presenting and speaking publicly, but they're also talking about a topic that's very near to them, but also a topic that's very difficult and hard. So firstly, we have Dr. Eileen Cummings, first generation stolen generation, removed and taken to Croker Island in the early 1940s. Then we have Uncle Halpenhart, first generation Croker Island survivor. Then we have Uncle Francis Storer, first generation Retta Dixon survivor. Miss Rosanna DeSantis, descendant of the stolen generation, whose mother was placed at Garden Point Mission on the Tiwi Islands. Another descendant of the stolen generation, Miss Lynette Fijo, who also lived at Retta Dixon in Darwin with her parents. Then we have a very well-known personality of Darwin, Mr. Charlie King, who is a descendant of the stolen generation whose mother was placed in Carlin compound. And then we have somebody I know very well and very proud to say is my mother, who is a descendant of the stolen generation, and Mum's mother was put in Carlin compound. So I guess we're just going to have a yarn and a conversation, so you decide what questions you want to contribute to the discussion.
It all began back in 1911, Native Affairs with Native Ordinance. 1923 was significant, where they actually passed an act that Aboriginal women were not the custodian of their child. It gave the government their so-called powers to remove children of which we just had a different coloured skin. I was taken away when I was 10. We were supposed to go to the bungalow. And beside my name it says, no, we don't want them. We're full. So they sent us out to Croker Island. So yeah, we just moved around like cattle. 1967 referendum. Up until then, I didn't know whether I was a flower or an animal. Flora and fauna. 1967, Aboriginal people were allowed to vote. So we've been through a fair bit, but we're still here.
If I can just add on to that, I always wondered why or how these people who were picking up these children knew where they were. So that is, the territory's a big place and they're only getting around on horses. And so I went back and I researched and I found that there was an act that said it was unlawful on people who knew that there was a child there who was not full Aboriginal, fathered by whatever, yeah. If they knew they were there, then it was unlawful for them not to give that information to the police and welfare who were roaming around the territory looking for these kids.
My parents were put in the home at a young age. My father was put in to Retta Dixon home, and also my mother. I grew up in Retta Dixon home with my parents. Our parents didn't speak much about when they was put in the home because it was very traumatising for them. They told us when we was old enough, and it was really hard for myself and my two brothers. Both parents worked as children, as at the government house as a tea lady, and also my dad worked at the hospital. One of his brothers had to go to another home down in Adelaide. I think it was St Francis. The only way Dad could speak to his brother was through the fence. That's why I have a lot of respect for all the elders at Retta Dixon, Harlan Compound, Croker Island, and all the other missions.
They were sitting at the river when the policeman come on horseback. They picked her up, stole her. Her mother chased after them, tried and tried to get her baby, her daughter, back. It didn't happen. They put her on a buggy and they brought her into the Harlan compound. She was 8 years old. My mother stayed by the fence, waiting and waiting for her mother, who she never saw again. The system needs to look at what has happened here. This was a law of the time. A law of the time that could take children. My mother was taken because of the colour of her skin. Today, I share this story with you in the hope that this never happens again.
I was taken from my family in 1946. I was 4 years old. I often, thought about my family because I never grew up with my mother or my father. I lived with parents, foster parents that looked after me. Ireland's mother-in-law, she looked after me when I was a 10-year-old boy. And after that, I was 11-year-old, I went back to the farm. And thanks for coming to listen to me. Okay? Bottom of my heart.
Sorry, we get a little bit emotional sometimes. We're trying to tell you the stories, but all the time it still hurts.
So Mum was taken as a 5-year-old in 1939, and she still considered herself fortunate because she was put at Garden Point Mission. And that just blows my mind, thinking my mother could think so positively about such a traumatic time or event. Aside from the awful terribles that they had to endure with being punished for speaking their language, speaking Tiwi language, they were punished because the laws made it so that they had to speak English. But I flipped the narrative on that because when I went back to Tiwi Islands for 10 years and I lived and worked there, I reconnected with family and I learned language, and I now share that with my children. And we're not fluent by any measure, and it's not just the swear words we know. And for those of you sitting in there, and I can see my sister-in-law there, she knows how much of a mischievous character my mother was. But it's terrible to think that a child that young could be beaten for speaking what should be right in their own language.
Those are the things that happen to the stolen generation, and we want this recorded in the history of this country, because after all, we are the First Nations people of this country. This is our land. It's been taken off us, it's been mined, it's been done, all sorts of things. But have they ever thought about the children who they removed from the country? Because we can't fight. I have arguments all the time with my mum at Nooka, because my grandfather is the head of that country. And they say, but Eileen, you don't live there. I said, who cares? My grandfather lived there. And all my people live there. I'm still his descendant. But of course I don't get recognised in that area. And it's a sad thing. That's how all the time the Stolen Generation people, we don't only fight for the government, we also fight our land councils, because we're not recognised there. Just because we were removed from that country, and how dare they say that when we were born of that country, that's where we came from. Those are the things that I want people to remember and to realise, and we want the government to still recognise that.
I couldn't talk about this until about 10 years ago. It was too difficult to talk about because much of it I didn't know for starters. But what happened in that compound, we don't know. We don't know. But if you have a look at that little A-frame thing there with the photos on it, the top two photos are the kids in the Carlin compound. The bottom two photos are kids in a concentration camp. Have a look at their faces, have a look at the trauma of being removed from their family. So it was a really traumatic thing. And Sorry Day is great, I know that, and we come in, we talk about it. We'll all go home, but you know what? The hurt will still be here with us. We'll still find it difficult to talk about and difficult to share. But we're connected in common with our colleagues here or people here who've all suffered the same sort of thing. So, ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to take you on a little bit of a journey back by video, back when our family went to find where Mum was taken from, Limbunya Station. But hope you enjoy it. It only goes for about 3 minutes. I want my children, my grandchildren, to know who they are and feel proud of that. I want them to understand who the Gurindji people are. I mean, I'm proud of my Gurindji heritage.
ABC Sports commentator Charlie King is part of the celebrations.
Got it across their half-back line. They're free out on the wing.
For the first time, Charlie King has brought his entire family back to country. This land is not only the birthplace of land rights, but it's where Charlie King's mother was torn from family and country, one of the stolen generations.
That's a great goal. Mum said she thought they were just going for a ride, and then she tried to get off, but they wouldn't let her off, and they tied her on the horse, I think, in the end, because she was just beside herself, because it all was clear to her that they were taking her away.
Aborigine accommodation at Vesti's Limbunya Station is better than average.
She was just a little girl, and they lived on the edge of the station as the tribes always did. You know, they were allowed to take on some sort of work and jobs and whatever, and that's what she did. Her job was to pick vegetables and watermelons. Yes, we've just come back to sort of go to the water hole because that's where they took her away, I think, when she was about 8 years of age.
How long ago was that?
Well, that's 1940, and Nana would have been taken away 100 years ago.
Crazy to think that Nana was here.
Yeah, would you think?
As a little girl.
So she would have been about Mia's age?
Yeah.
She would have come down here, Mia, to this, and she would have swam in that. I said, what do you remember of your childhood? And she said, I just remember riding bareback on horses wherever I wanted to go. And then eventually they came and got her and took her away from here.
This is the land where his mother was taken away on horseback.
The Gurindji men, about 5 of them, followed those horses for more than a week. And Mum knew that they had spears and they had weapons that they were carrying, and they were obviously looking for a way in which they could get those children and bring them back. But they were afraid of the guns. They knew of the massacres. They knew that how strong the weapon was, and they didn't want to fail in what they were doing. But I think they followed them for a week on foot. And then in the end, Mum said one night she looked and they weren't there, and she realised that they must have gone back without the kids.
They were taken to the Carlin compound in Darwin, a reserve used to segregate and control Aboriginal people. There, the 3 girls were separated.
And they separated them because they didn't want them to speak their language, and so they were all alone, and they had big wire fences around them. And I remember she always used to say to me, one day I'm picking watermelons, next day I'm cleaning out the toilets, and that's how much my life had changed.
Charlie's mother, Ngadi, wouldn't see this land for decades.
But what a joyous occasion it must have been when those 3 horses arrived again, 20 years later,
dad, mum and a pack horse coming out of the east, riding into this rockhole area, and there stands her mum, and, you know, must have been amazing, really. Must have been. It's a good story. It's a positive story, and here we are. And the kids are here, and they understand it's important, they understand it. And if they learn that and they feel proud about it, then that's a good thing.
So my message is that trauma goes passed down to the next generation. It just keeps being passed on. It's intergenerational, we know that, and there really needs to be a lot of, a lot more work done in that space, I think, recognising that. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. So as we think about the future, what are your wishes, your hopes, your dreams for our future generations?
It all comes down to me to just be fairness. We need to be put it on an equal plane with whoever, whatever race of people we have to compete with. It's about fairness. So it hasn't ended. So you just got to fight for fairness.
So we've been fighting for 30 odd years to get this recognition and get this apology from the government. So all we ask them to do is to acknowledge what they did to us children and to take responsibility.
It is my hope in the very near future that most of you see and do write the word YES on your referendum form, because it really will be the first opportunity that we have a seat at the table and we are recognised in our nation's birth certificate, and that can only be a good thing.
I'm hopeful, I'm positive. My mum said to me, the advice she gave me when we talked about these issues, she said, don't get bitter, get better. Yeah. So I've often lived by that and think I'll try to always be better. I tell you, I was so pleased to walk in and see so many of you here today. I just feel the warmth and I know how strong we can be. Thanks for being part of it.
The young people of today can make the change that's needed to bring equality, to have a future. For the younger generations at school, that's where they need to stay. Education is empowerment.
Thank you to all of our strong and brave and courageous panellists who have been sharing their life experiences and stories that is fraught with lots of sadness and pain and hurt. But for your courage, we thank you.
This NAIDOC week, celebrate For Our Elders with First Nations TV.